What if most spooky quantum experiments are not different mysteries, but the same few mechanisms rearranged in different costumes? In the energy filament theory, you can decode almost any setup by tracking 4 moving parts' shared origin rules. The route map drawn by boundaries, where closure threshold stamp clicks, and whether memory leaks into the environment. Because measurement is always coupling plus closure plus memory, confusion usually happens when we blend these roles into one foggy word like observation. So let's separate them without losing the story. First, there are shared origin rules. When 2 outcomes come from the same source event, they can carry coordinated constraints that only show up after you compare records, not inside a single local click. That's why entanglement correlations feel non-local if you expect each click to contain the answer. But they look ordinary once you treat them like 2 devices shipped from the same factory with matched calibration marks. Each device alone outputs noisy numbers, yet the pair reveals a pattern when you align timestamps and compare. Second, there is routing, which is where wave-like behavior actually lives. Boundaries and geometry carve a route map in the energy sea, and the local sea state determines what paths are favored, suppressed, or phase-shifted. Interference is not a particle being into places with timines. It's a medium writing a traffic pattern that only becomes visible after many closure events printed out. Third, there is closure. Detectors, absorbers, and material gates do not produce half events. They cross a closure threshold and stamp a discrete outcome, or they do nothing. This is where clicks come from. And different experimental designs can force different closure logic. Sometimes each arm closes separately. Sometimes the apparatus recombines arms and closes them as one interference-defined channel. Fourth, there is memory leakage. If the environment can record distinguishing information, like which path, which phase, which timing, then coherence doesn't vanish by magic. It gets dispersed into many degrees of freedom and becomes inaccessible as a clean interference resource. That is decoherence in plain language. The world becomes a CCTV network, and once the footage exists, the pattern you hope to see gets averaged into a classic-looking blur. Put these together and you get a practical workflow that works on almost everything. Ask what boundaries were installed and what route maps they drew. Ask where the closure threshold is and what exactly counts as a stamped event. Ask what records can be stored and whether the environment can keep a distinguishable tag. The punchline is simple, and it's worth memorizing exactly because it stops you from inventing ghosts. The quartet stays, only its combinations and channels change. Once you run a double slit, a quantum eraser, a Zano setup, or an entanglement test through this checklist, the math stops feeling like a spell and starts feeling like a compressed map file of a mechanism you can actually picture. Tap follow, share it on New Physics, Clear Universe.